Hi, Rashonda here. We are reading Hagar's Daughter by Pauline Hopkins. We are on chapter 17. It's longer than some of the other chapters. I'm fascinated about what's going to happen next, so let's dive in. It was long after midnight and the guests were leaving when Sumner, with white set face, sought Mrs. Bowen and asked for Jewel. She was much concerned over her daughter. I do not understand it, was her reply to his eager questions. Jewel sent word by General Benson that she was not well and had gone to her rooms. She was all right and as gay as possible all day. I thought you would know. Finding that he could not explain matters that night and would accomplish nothing by waiting, Sumner left the scene of revelry, desiring to be alone. So he just left? Okay, so he asked if he could see Jewel, and Jewel had told her mom that she was sick. Did that mean he had to leave? Like he can't see her if she's sick? All right. Finding that he could not explain matters that night and would accomplish nothing by waiting, Sumner left the scene of revelry, desiring to be alone. How it had all happened, he could not tell, but what a sentimental fool he felt himself to be for allowing himself to be betrayed into acting such a scene in so public a place. Still, he felt that he could blame no one but himself. Aurelia was free from any intention of scheming, for how could she know of Jewel's presence at just that moment? So he argued, lulling his suspicions to rest. Aw, Puddin'. Aw, she's capable of all kinds of stuff. It didn't sound like he was really trying to push her back when she was all on him. And also, Jewel could have talked with him and not just screamed and run away. Like, this could have gone down differently by all parties. I get so frustrated when people don't act like adults. I'm not saying I want to see my husband snugged up on somebody. I don't. I truly, truly do not. And I would be hot if I did, but I would also talk to him and find out what's going on. I've read enough 19th century fiction to know that what things look like is not necessarily what it is. And, enough Hallmark movies, because there's always that moment in the Hallmark movie where people exchange a laugh, a hug, or whatever, and the love interest peeks in and sees it, and then they're like, oh, it's all over. Anyway, at 8 o'clock while breakfasting, there came a letter from Jewel with his ring enclosed. She wasted zero time in doing the most. Then indeed it seemed to him that life was over. With mad and bitter wrath, he cursed Aurelia Madison. Then he started for Jewel's home. The servant who answered the summons was one wont to have a welcoming smile for the familiar visitor. There was no expression in his well-trained face when he informed Sumner that the ladies were not at home. Night found him again at the Bowen mansion. Mrs. Bowen was coldness itself. Jewel begged to be excused. Despair seized him. Everything, everyone was repulsive to him. Days of insane recklessness followed. A month went by in this manner, working furiously days, spending his nights in search of the excitement that was supposed to drown care. Oh man, so he went to see her. She said no. And so then he just decided to be reckless. I guess he's drinking and partying. Oh my goodness. Then he grew calmer. He would seek Jewel again. He would force her trust, should she believe in him. That's funny. You can't force somebody's trust, but then he would force her trust. Oh, she should believe in him. I read that wrong because I was like, that's a contradiction. I'll force your trust, should you believe in me, but it's I'll force your trust. She should believe in him. Life was not worth living without her. For one touch of her cool hand, one glance from her calm eyes, one smile on the sweet, earnest lips, he would barter wealth and fame and all the world had to offer. Life itself. I'm sorry, but we'd had the conversation before. They had met frequently in society during this memorable month, but Jewel passed her lover without a sign of recognition or with a slight bend of the head in acknowledgement of his reverential uncovering. General Benson was always in close attendance, and Aurelia Madison also was often her companion. Was she unaware that Sumner was snugged up on Aurelia Madison? I don't believe she was unaware. I mean, he said, Aurelia, do not weep so. It is torture for me to hear you. And then she said, I hope I may die. Oh, if only I could. And Jewel saw that. So Jewel is given Sumner the cut hard, yet she's still best friends with Aurelia. I wonder what Aurelia told her. I am intrigued. All right, let's keep reading. After the usual 9 days of wonderment and surmises as to the cause of the estrangement between lovers, public curiosity turned to speculating on the middle-aged general's chances with the fair heiress. At 7 o'clock one evening, Cuthbert sat at his desk in his rooms, lost in somber thoughts. He had determined to devote himself to the hardest of tasks, heavy brain work. When his heart and soul were racked with agony, he was busy on a political treatise. He was considered a brilliant writer. If he could make a stir in the literary world, it would please his father, and he had no one else to think of now. Work? Could he work? He flung out his arms over the papers on the desk before him and bowed his head upon them. If I knew that the suffering was for myself alone, my blossom, I could bear it better. Oh, sir, if I knew that the suffering was for myself alone, my blossom, I could bear it better. I don't care so much that I suffer. I care that you're suffering, when really what you care about is that you are suffering. Don't couch that in something different. He lifted himself at last, haggard and weary, as with weeks of sleepless toil, resolved to devote himself to his chosen work. What I am, I will live on to the end. Ambition, my only bride. He was striving with all his young, courageous heart to kill the memory of the girl he loved. It was a bitter task and an impossible one. Totally feel like they just need to have a conversation. Why can't this happen? I mean, he could write her a letter if she refuses to see him. I mean, she might just get his letter and rip it up, but I bet she would read it. He could write her a letter. He could just hang out at her house all day. She'll eventually talk to him or have him arrested. Like, I feel like those are pretty much the options. Oh, okay. Modern pessimists are fond of crying that love, as well as chivalry, has died out of our practical world. If this were true, then Sumner lived after his century, for his belief in higher and better things was intense. He had a desire to worship purity in any shape, to champion the weak, and carve a pathway to honor that was characteristic of the chivalrous days of old. That I know I've talked before about the house behind the cedars. That sounds like a bunch of the rot that the guy in House Behind the Cedars was talking, until it turned out he loved a black woman and he didn't know it. And then all this, I love purity and championing the weak and chivalry, went out the window. Let's see if our friend Sumner is the same. I mean, we don't know if Jewel is black or not. I've got questions. I've got hunches, but I don't know. Let us keep reading, see who Jewel might really be, and see what that does to how Sumner feels about chivalry. All right, the minutes passed. 7:30 ticked away, and then 8, and he never moved. He sat with his face on his two hands, his elbows planted on the table. I have been there, just stuck, can't move, can't get up, can't think. I will not think more about her, he said to himself doggedly. I will not. John, his servant, a New England colored man who had known him from his youth, had put his evening clothes out in the dressing room and now entered the room to remind his master of an engagement to dine. It's time you was dressed, Mr. Cuthbert, he said in his quiet way. John was eager for his master to leave Washington and return to Massachusetts and the family home. "'Deed," he argued to himself, "this Washington's no city for me. Give me old New England every time. It's God's own country. They's nothing human about the South for chocolate complected gents like me, no matter how you fix it. The pint of the argument is in the scorpion's tail. Just so, and this here Southern idea of colored Americans ain't good for black nor white when you's John had a New England raisin. I get that. And do keep in mind, DC is in the South. We I know like currently I kind of think of it as east and north, but it was in the South. Slavery reigned there. This is post slavery, but the mindset is still there. And his servant was like, no, give me New England. Ain't nothing for me down here in the South. I feel ya. I wonder though who Sumner, Cuthbert, Sumner, Cuthbert, whichever way it goes. Like, what's his engagement to Dine? Is hmm. All right. Mr. Cuthbert's an altered man since the night of that there Bowen ball, he told himself again and again. This is the servant named John. If he ain't 20 years older in his looks, then I'm blind in one eye and can't see out of the other. He'll be best off if he gets back home to the old gentleman. Dog my cats, but there's something strange in this whole kick up, or my name ain't John Robinson. Sumner roused himself at last. What's the time, John? He was asking as the bell of the suite rang shrilly. If that's Mr. Badger, show him in, he said as John went out of the room. Cuthbert stood gazing down into the fire. He heard voices outside, but he gave them no heed. There was always a good-natured controversy between his friend and his servant. A slap on the back and "Hello, Sumner, old man," made him start round and put his gloomy thoughts behind him and greet his friends, Will Badger and Carol West. "Ah, how are you, Will? How are you, West? How goes it?" he said, holding out his hand in greeting to his guests. "Thought I'd bring West with me, and after we dine at the club, take a look in at the Madisons. This is their at home night. West's agreeable," with a laugh and a meaning look in the latter's direction. Okay, so this whole thing without speaker tags. I mean, we get it's Will because he said, I thought I'd bring West along with me, but isn't that interesting? Let's go out to dinner and then let's look in at the Madisons. Hmm. Sumner hesitated. Aurelia had written him again and again, but he had not answered her impassioned letters. She had begged him to call and let her help set matters right, but as yet he had not been able to bring himself to comply with her request. Well, he replied to Will Badger after a moment, I don't mind. Have a glass of wine while I change. Thanks, we don't mind, said West. West never did mind. He was fond of a social glass, and Sumner was noted for his fine wine and excellent brand of cigars. Yes, we'll have a little game with the Major, he remarked as he helped himself from the sideboard. Great fun. The Major knows a thing or two about life, does the old man. He knows enough to win your money, I suppose, you foolish boy, replied Sumner. It's very little I've lost there. He always insists on returning me my money. Have others been as fortunate? At this point, like who's really talking? Okay, so I'm assuming West is the one who says we'll have a little game with the Major. It's Sumner who says he'll take your money. I assume it's West again who says he always insists on returning me my money. And then somebody says, have others been as fortunate? I'll assume it's Sumner. Yeah, I mean, I'll assume it's Sumner. Have others been as fortunate? That's their own fault. The Major wins fair every time, replied West hotly. Oh, West, you're prejudiced in his favor, broke in Badger. A pretty daughter is a trump card. She can't help being charming and attracting men to the house, stoutly maintained West. Charming but dangerous, my dear fellow. No idea who said that. I'll assume Sumner, but maybe he wouldn't want to play his cards like that and say that. I do not know. I need more speaker tags in this book. All right. Charming but dangerous, my dear fellow. Sumner, Badger. Let's go with Badger. Ah, yes, it is Badger, and I know from the next line. All right. Charming but dangerous, my dear fellow. She's my friend. I would be more to her if it were not for my poverty. Don't malign her, Badger. I won't stand it. So that was clearly Sumner. My dear, oh, shoot, that wasn't Sumner. My dear boy, broke in Sumner soothingly. Okay, so Badger says, charming but dangerous, my dear fellow. And then West says, she's my friend. I would be more to her if it were not for my poverty. Okay, so that couldn't have been Sumner, but she's my friend. I thought it was Sumner. Although, again, he probably doesn't want to play his cards like that. All right. Badger says, charming, but dangerous, my dear fellow. West says, she's my friend. I would be more to her if it were not for my poverty. Don't malign her, Badger. I won't stand it. So West is saying he would be with her if he weren't poor, but she needs somebody with money. My dear boy, broke in Sumner soothingly, Badger and I are your friends. Don't be angry with us. We mean it for your good. Aurelia Madison is one of those women with whom mere friendship is impossible. Men must always be half her lovers, and therein lies the secret of her power, of any woman's power over our sex, if she is inclined to use that power to our detriment. Oh, she's circumspect, he continued as West attempted a vehement interruption. I believe that it is not in her to care enough for any one to kick over the advantages of respectability for his sake, but she'll sail close